Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours, Monday through Friday, from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, right from the farm. And engineering today is Blake. Blake, thank you so much for being with us today. Debra Brewster is in the front of the classroom today. She is in Missouri. She has her master's in business administration. She idles at 120 miles an hour. She is a builder, a contractor, and she is an innovator, and she is going to share with you some of her experiences as a preparedness-minded person. Welcome, Debra Brewster.
Morning.
Did I say that right? That you idle at 120 miles an hour?
You know, for the most part, I do. But there's it's really what propels my idling at high speed. And that's really just a sense of urgency where we are at this time. And frankly, it's terrifying. And I know that there are only two things that generally motivate people, and it's the fear of loss or the prospect of gain. In my past life, I'll call it, when I was ignorant to the sickness that this world, this country is, the state that we're currently in, I was motivated by the prospect of gain. I always had my cup as half empty, half full. And, my whole perspective has changed as the time that I believe is quickly closing in. And I'm just nauseated for the things that are to come upon this earth and this country. And I just feel that the time is so limited. And if people, the time for them to get ready to take care of their family, we are on the precipice of really, I believe, ruin in this country. And the time is so short. And it grieves me, just such grief. I ponder upon this from even family, friends, just even the preppers that I know, really the lack of inertia behind their motivation to do things. Maybe they're seeking perfection as opposed to just implement anything. Every step you take, and believe me, I've made many, many wrong mistakes, allocated precious resources to stupid endeavors because I wanted to live in two worlds. Yes, I wanted to be prepared, but I wanted to be on the other side of the fence. I wanted life to continue as it has always been. And so money that I could have, redirected or directed to critical acquisitions of provisions, it's been lost. But, I thank God that there is a limited time. And, all we can do is when we make a mistake is churn and refocus our efforts and say, what contingencies do I need to implement? What can I do with the lack of time left to get ready for my family? And, if you're not, some people say, I'd just rather die. I don't want to live through that. Well, you know what? Think beyond yourself. Serve a purpose to humanity, to starting with your children, your spouses, your loved ones, your friends, and if you don't care enough about your own life, perhaps direct those energies thinking about other ones that you have a moral responsibility to help to help save them. This is a collaboration. It's going to take a lot of effort of a lot of people coming together. And Vince, you know as well as I do, very few people walk the walk. They're not willing to make the sacrifice. No matter how much it's screaming at them, they just want to drink the Kool-Aid. They don't want to face the time that we're entering into.
Wow. Okay, I've got a response to that, and I'm in total agreement. And I've heard that, Deborah. I've heard people say, "Wow, geez, I wouldn't want to live through the times that we're going to. I'd rather be raptured. I'd rather be, dead." That's extremely selfish. I'll tell you why. If they don't care to live through it, they are going to leave their children alone. Imagine that. Imagine leaving your children alone.
I can't.
It's unacceptable.
Man is so morally depraved, nothing surprises me. It's just when I look at the things like the Illuminati and, the Freemasonry and all these things that people want to deny that they even exist. They go, you're a conspiracy, theory, a person. People do not want to do their homework, because I'll tell you, if you do your homework and you look at all the alternative media, all the opportunity is there. The truth is there to be revealed, but it's up to us to search out the truth. And when we see that truth, we have an obligation to do whatever we can to prepare. And I have done it. I wish that there's so many things when I look at your setup, Vince, that, if I had made so many stupid mistakes, I could have easily been there. But it is water under the bridge, and I just have to say, what have I done? What have I learned? And believing that, I had the wake-up call, that I just have to use every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't look at an item I use out of my pantry, or one step, or the animals, or whatever it is, and say, am I prepared? Have I made the provisions? Do I need to replace something? What's the next step? What do I need to do this day to move toward that self-sufficiency as much as one can? And not only is it the physical preparation, you better also do your best to make sure that you have family, friends, whoever is those individuals that are going to help you to take care of your homestead, your saving your family, saving your life. And it's a tall order.
Deborah, I'd like to read to you and to the class an email I got yesterday. Okay. And the email is let me say it this way. Some of my best friends I've never met. Now, of course, I've met you, and you've been to the farm, and we've been to events together, and we've spent some time together, and it's been wonderful. But some of my friends I've never met in person. And I'm going to tell you about one of them right now. And next hour, another one is going to be on the air. A dear friend, but I've never met him. And that's Kyle Harris. Let me talk about Dane Wigington right now. Another friend I've never met in person. So the email came in yesterday, and it says, "Hello, Vincent. I apologize that due to the ongoing fires now on our west, north, and east sides." And just as a side note, Dane Wigington is in California, and he's surrounded on three sides, or he's experiencing fires on three sides of him on his reserve where he lives. I'm buried with fire protection preparations. The great unraveling is here. It will continue to accelerate. Again, I apologize for needing to bow out for the moment. I will be laying water lines and installing water tanks and plumbing for a while. Also, additional fuel removal, etc. If my house is to be protected, it's up to me. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If there's any part of my weekly update that you find of use, you can use it. You can see my predicament. I must defend my home. And the forest is not as green any longer as it was in the 10-year-old photo below. And what Dane Wigington is saying is he can't depend on very many others to protect his house, his buildings, his reserve. We'll call it his farm. It's up to him. And I have experienced that kind of thing as well. Not necessarily the fire part, but what I'm saying is the going it alone part. When I thought people were with me, I turned around in multiple times in my life, big events, where there was a big fight going on, where we were fending off the big mad machine that wanted to put a dump in our county and destroy it. Or a time when the county or the town wanted to put a prison right next to my property in the middle of a rural setting. Made no sense. And we fought that. And people said, I'm with you. We're with you. We're behind you. We're behind you 110%, whatever that means. I don't know how you can be more than 100%, but that's what they say. And at one point, at the end, I looked around. It was just me. They were behind me, but they were so far behind me I couldn't see them. And I found out literally it was just me. So I think Dane Wigington is saying that he is under siege by the fires, and he's doing everything he can to protect what he has. And my response to Dane Wigington, I'll read this to you. My response to him was, Dane, I wish I could be there to lend a hand. Our prayers are with you in this most difficult time. I know that you know what to do, so no need for advice from me. Stay safe, and if you need a place, you have one here. And I put my phone number, Vincent. And I meant every word of it. I meant every word of it. And one of the things that is unwritten at USA Prepares is that the instructors will stand together. It's unwritten. But if any instructor needs help from any other instructor, I expect that it will just appear. I'm not demanding it. I just know it'll happen. And we lead by example. And that's who we are. So, Deborah, when we come back, maybe you could share some of your experiences as to, what you found trying to get people to understand and work with them and how well it's worked for you. We'll be right back. Debra Brewster's with us. So, Deborah, you've been preparing for a while, and you've been working with other people, showing them, leading by example, I should say. What have you found? Have you found that people say, hey, thanks so much for helping me. I'm looking forward to doing this with you. I appreciate your help.
What I found is that most people, if they are truly preparers and they have, started preparing several years back, for the most part, those people envision doing it on their own and perhaps their immediate family. And so it seems that either they fall into that category and they, perhaps believe that they're just going to bug in. But in terms of being really able to make a contribution, I found it to be not really a worthwhile cause. Very few people, they're not even willing to make the, let's say, sacrifice for their own family, web along to make any contribution into my life. And I find that only the diehards, meaning the ones that really take it serious, are willing to share their time and their energy, their knowledge. But 80% of the people do, maybe 90%, fall in the category, they're just not willing to make the sacrifice. And even those that have it and don't have, let's say, much income, they're not even willing to give up the cable TV to buy the food provision. They, it's like, yeah, they get it, but they're really not executing. They're not following through. And that's the part, I preach this song every day to anybody I come in contact with. Every time I go to the grocery store, if I use my debit card, and, now they tell you to put the chip in, I tell people, you realize they're going to come to you eventually. We're going to go digital, and they're going to want you to take the chip. And I try to explain to them. Half of them are clueless to what I'm talking about. That there is going to come a time that they're going to crash this economy, and we are going to go to a cashless society. It's probably going to be biometric. And if you don't want to participate in that, especially the transition time, between crashing our currency to implementation by the one world order, because the globalists, we're nothing to them. We are simply the slaves to enrich them. But if people can't even get that concept, and they just won't even go and spend even $500, it doesn't take a fortune to begin to prepare, whether it's buying, 50-pound bags of beans and rice and all these, things, but they just aren't even willing to make the smallest sacrifice. It's just mind-boggling to me. And yet I could tell people as they wake up, there are things that maybe they, what I would consider like get right away, from, buying seeds, because you're going to have to produce your own, food. Look at Venezuela. Look at all the countries that have collapsed around the world. You have got to figure out how to produce your own food. You have to figure out what you need to produce that food and how you're going to preserve that food. I mean, food security is going to be the number one thing. Tied into that is water security. If, have you figured out where you're going to procure your water if you're on city water? Or even if you have a well, do you have a hand pump to extract the water? Do you have a pond? Do you have what's it going to take to purify that water that you don't get some, born disease from the water? I mean, there's just, getting your food provisions at least ready, your water safety provisions ready. I mean, there's, obviously everyone knows to have personal protection, but do you even have it? I mean, literally, do you have enough to protect your family, to protect your provision? The list is so long. Do you have the right clothing to make it through the winters? From literally, do you have the work gloves? Do you, if you're preserving your food, have you bought, have you learned? Do you have your canning jars? Do you have your vinegar? Do you have your sugar? Do you have your salt? Have you learned about pickling? Have you learned about fermentation? Have you learned to, grow that vegetables in a crisis situation where there's, bad weather? I mean, there's just so many things to prepare for.
Debra, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about the big game on the weekend, the tailgate party. Oh, hey, let's get all the stuff that we need for the tailgate party. We're willing to do that, for a game. But what about for our lives? We'll be right back. David, you're up next. Debra Brewster's with us in Missouri, and David in Illinois. Welcome. You're on with Debra Brewster.
How you doing? Yes,
well,
I could speak to through experience from a lot of the situations you're talking about. We have supplies. Now, I was feeded. I would be around and by people that would give me highly classified information about things happening. And I would tell some of my friends and show them what to do. Now, when Snowden came out, and that guy's out of his country, but the things I said would happen and could happen when Snowden came out, the people I told actually came up to me and said, "I thought you were not serious," and they wouldn't even talk to me no more. Instead of realizing what could happen or what capabilities were, they just don't want to hear about it, And some people, when we showed them how to put together supplies, I said, look, if something happens, you're going to have to, they would spend $300 a month on a cable bill, but they wouldn't even spend a dime on a water filtration system. Nothing. And
I think what you're doing is you're echoing what Debra Brewster said.
Yeah,
different words,
exactly.
Same message.
And here's the one big thing. I started to have people come over and say, well, why should we do it? We'll just come and take yours. And that's what the hard part to deal with is.
I can address that. I can address that. I was on the radio in Springfield, Missouri, and one of our close family friends has a business, and we'll call it a customer, came into this business and said, have you heard this guy on the radio? This guy Finelli. And she said, yeah. And the customer said, you think he's right? what he's saying? And she said, yes. And the customer said, well, if it gets as bad as he says, I'm just going over to his house. Now, I don't know this customer, okay? And I was told this by our friend. And when she told me, I said, okay, I'm going to address this. So the next day I went on the radio, and I said, I've been doing this for years. I've been teaching people how to prepare, why to prepare, what to think about, and so forth. And if they think that I can help them when things get bad, I can't. I don't have that many pillows. I don't have that many can openers. I don't have that many cans of food. I don't have that many blankets. I don't have that many square feet. I can't do it. But if anyone thinks that after I've been teaching them for years and years and years and they've been ignoring what we've been saying, and yet they want to come to my house and help themselves, it will be a bad day for everybody involved.
That's what I told someone. Yeah.
And we have relatives, outlaws. I love them dearly, but they don't quite fully understand the supply chain. They don't understand how precarious we are perched. They've said things like, well, we'll just come to your place. And my response to them is, okay, but you better bring everything you need. Your blankets, your pillows, your food, everything. Everything you need. Q-tips, everything. And I mean it, because we don't have it all. It's impossible. We can't, a person can't earn a living for a family, keep the family together, and then have enough reserves to help other families. There are people who cheat, lie, cheat, and steal. We call them politicians, and we call them the captains of corporations. Yeah, they can do it because they bilk us. But hardworking people, it's impossible. It's impossible to take care of lots of other families, your extended family.
Speaking to
yes.
that, there are fairly easy ways that people can secure their living arrangements. And frankly, people should just buy an RV. At least if you have an RV, you can provision it out. You have a place, if you have to bug out and leave your homestead, you at least can live on the way. And, I'm not sure where you would go, but, at the same time, people don't want to even spend the money. I tell them, finance it. Well, I don't want to go in debt. Well, I get that. But let me tell you, if this whole system blows up, the last thing you have to worry about is them finding you to come and repossess your RV. You have to think, or your travel trailer. You have to think about these things. You just have got to take steps, and it does require sacrifice. At my property, we installed, I have 5 RV hookups that I put on my property. 4 of the 5 all have 30 and 50 amp plugs. I have water, sewer, because we have a septic. Yeah, I've got 2 septics. I put in 2 wells. I have a hand pump because I know I cannot defend everything by myself. But if people would at least make an investment to a housing on wheels, they could come here. But they have to, like you said, they've got to come prepared. They're not going to come and live in my home. That is reserved for me and my children and my grandchildren. People have got to take ownership of preparing for their own needs.
Debra?
I don't use a travel trailer for vacationing. It is a provision, one thing on the checklist that if I have to abandon site, I have a ways to take my security with me.
Debra, I'd like to address that. Many years ago when I lived in Virginia, there was a farm that was for sale, and I thought, our children might benefit from this. So instead of keeping money in the bank, this is when we had we had a corporation that was manufacturing computers, and we had a little extra reserves. So Mrs. Finelli and I bought this farm, and it had a farmhouse that needed some work. So I put an ad in the paper, and I said that if you'd like to help renovate this farm, there will be a drastic rent reduction for doing extra work on this farm. And we said, if you're interested, show up on Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning. And a whole bunch of families showed up. And we interviewed, some of them had skills and some of them didn't. Now, obviously, if we wanted the house to be renovated in lieu of rent, we wanted someone who actually could do it and had the skills to do it. Well, there was a guy who could, and his wife. So we said, okay, you got the farm. It wasn't first come, first served. It was who's the best equipped to work this project with us. And then there was this couple, this guy and gal, younger, and they were really bummed out. And, I mean, they were really bummed out that they didn't get the opportunity to rent this farm. And so I talked to them, and I said, so what are you going to do? And they said, well, we're going to be camping out, at the park. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, we're homeless. I said, you're homeless. Okay. So I said, I'll tell you what. I think I can work this out. I'll buy a used camper. I think I know where I can get one. And I'll put this camper on the farm. And there is another house. It's a slave quarters built in the 1800s. And if you're interested in living in the camper trailer and renovating the slave quarters, you can live there for free. And I set it all up for them so they could live in this camper trailer. And it's certainly beat living in a tent.
Absolutely.
So the answer is you're absolutely right. And you don't have to spend a lot of money for one of these, RVs or trailers, because I bought one used. It was, I think, 16 feet. It wasn't really big, but it certainly had sleeping for two and had a kitchenette and a refrigerator and that kind of thing. And it was $1,200. So, yes, you can do it. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll wait, clue to people how serious it can get. Now, I'm on a list that people that are first responders at where Katrina was. Now, they had land and prepared. By the first day, they had parking space only on that land. Okay? People brought no weapons, no supplies. He had one well. People started coming in holding by gunpoint people's dogs and children until they gave them gas and water.
Wow. Wow, that's
so
crazy.
He said he will never do that again. He told people, you only come the next time unless you have weapons and things that are willing to help protect everyone else.
Absolutely.
David, let me make sure I understand. Please say it again. Who had the property? What was the offer? And who showed up?
Okay, this man, he's on my list. You can see he writes all about it in the preparedness section and things on it's called the FAL files, for FN files. It's a weapon. Okay. He's a first responder. I believe he's in rescue, fire and rescue, things like that. Down there, Louisiana area, things like that. So when the hurricane came, they were rescuing people. I think he had like 4 acres, 2 to 4 acres. But he had a well. And by the first day when they got back, there was parking room only on that spot.
Wow.
Parking room. And there was people trying to get on there. But the other people coming, they were stealing kids and holding them with guns and their dogs and pets and threatening to use them unless they gave them water and gas.
Frightening.
Okay, so you're saying society broke down right then and there?
Yes. He talks all about it on that file. There's a section in there all about preparedness and everything. He wrote that, and it's a big one. There's a lot about it,
David, if you can find that again, if you could send that to a link to instructor at USA Prepares, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
David.
informative. There's this one about somebody that's actually been through it,
Now, see, I'm not planning to open my property up to unknown quantities. The goal is to give a way to form a community where the entrance is very little, meaning if they come with their food, obviously there's safety provisions, and housing, at least we can form a community at my location. So, but to open it up to the unknown quantity out there, never. No way.
Nobody even brought generators. There was people walking from off his property with cords, just assuming they were going to plug into his.
Let me see if I've got this right. So today is the good times. We can go and buy whatever it is that we need if we have the currency for that. So we can go to the store, and if they don't have it, they can order it, and we can get it in a day or 2 or 3. These are the good days. And people still don't get along in the good days. And what you're talking about is just a sample of what it's going to be like when it gets rough.
Exactly.
David, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Debra Brewster's with us. And I wanted to make a comment about self-sufficiency. It's a lifestyle that's predicated upon being responsible for your own actions. and being ready at all times for what some may consider the unexpected. Okay? For example, the supply chain may be disrupted. The climate may change. The economy may falter or collapse. You know, there's fires, droughts, extreme heat, flooding. The list goes on and on and on. The electricity, you may have a brownout or a blackout. You may not be able to get the parts. You may not be able to get the gasoline, the food, or the propane. I mean, the list is virtually endless. Debra, it's a lifestyle, and it is not as easy as some may expect. And for example, you know, some people may say, I'll just grow a garden. You know, a garden does not magically appear. It doesn't. It takes years to get proficient in gardening. And then some may say, well, you know, I already have a garden, and no big deal. I'll just can some of my food. And they think that, you know, a case of canning jars is going to do the job. What do you have to say about that, Debra?
Wow, they're crazy. You know, I'll give you an example. I've bought, every year I try to buy a kit of heirloom seeds. And, of course, I can't possibly eat that much food with all the seeds that I have. But this year we used some of our cheaper seeds, and I probably had to replant my garden using that particular batch of seeds, like at least 4 to 5 times. You know, 50% of the garden had to be replanted because the seeds did not survive. And we're fairly experienced at growing our own food, but, you know, it's that. Or, in fact, a neighbor went out of town and asked me to take care of their garden and to water while they were gone. When I went there were so many beetles that almost their entire garden was, you know, it was eaten up. I was, like, shocked. I've never seen so many beetles in my life. I mean, there's so many things. And the food preparation, you know, canning jars, I'll use 6 to 10 jars a day just with barely getting, you know, any yield out of my garden, meaning it's very easy to do that. And that's quite a bit of food. But, I mean, you need hundreds. If you really get on the Internet and you see what other people that are really into, you know, food preparation, literally they'll have 300-400 canning jars. I've blown through filling up 100 jars just like, not even like deliberately doing it. I just, you know, every day I'd go to the garden, pick some stuff up. I knew I couldn't put that much food and keep it in my refrigerator, but just all the processes there, whether you're going to ferment it or you're going to pickle it. I mean, there's so much to learning and ways to preserve meat. You know, I've got only 2 cows, but would produce enough meat for us. We also raise rabbits. We also have a fish pond. But if I had to butcher both those cows because I could no longer give them grass because of drought, and I couldn't get access to feed, well, then I need to know how am I going to, one, butcher, not, you know, I'm going to have to kill it myself, have to butcher it, and figure out a way to preserve it. And so people don't realize, you know, just, I mean, how big of a challenge this is. We butchered just 2 deer on our property, and we had a third one in our scope, and we literally went 3 mornings out, and the first 2 days got a deer each day, and the third day we were just so tired. My son was here; he was going out of town. And we're like, you know what? Let's just let the deer go because we were so whipped just processing 2 deer, and these weren't even big deer. And we fortunately just froze the meat. But if we had to rapidly preserve that meat, and we're talking a cow or whatever the case may be, I mean, it's overwhelming. Rabbits, those that try to produce rabbits for food, you know, there's a period they got to go through that pregnancy. You know, fish. I have a fish pond that we stock. We excavated, put a big pond in. I went and bought, you know, all different types of fish. But, I mean, I feed them fairly regularly. But we could blow through that, you know, that inventory of fish fairly quickly if we were relying on that as, you know, our primary food source for protein. A lot of preparation.
And very quickly, we only have a few seconds left, Debra. How long did it take you to process that deer? First, you had to hang it, you had to skin it, and elapsed time.
It was about a day's process of time, you know, just going through the cleaning and the preparation and portioning it out to freeze it and things. It was a full day, and that was only maybe a 150-pound deer, if that.
And that was for, what, 2 people working on it?
Well, my son did all the butchering, and I was doing the wrapping, and we helped
two
him.
people.
I mean, we all were in the cleanup process. There's a lot to it. It's a big mess.
Deborah, thank you so much. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Kyle Harris is with us in Montana. Welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, Vince. You know,
hey.
I was a little upset at you at about 3 o'clock this morning.
Really?
I woke up at 3 o'clock, and I could not stop thinking about all the stuff we talked about last night until for about an hour and a half that it cost me a good sleep. But it was funny. I'm just teasing you.
I've got a short story to share with you. It'll
Sure.
probably be in concert with what we're going to be talking about for the next hour. One of our family friends and instructors had need of car repairs, and he lives in Springfield, Missouri. And so he brought the car to one of his buddies, and they gave him an estimate for a little over $5,000, actually between $5,000 and $6,000 to fix this vehicle. So I said, how about if I take a look at that? So I drove out to Springfield, and I said, I'll tell you what, you and I can do this together. You know, we can work on this as a project, and I think it'll be about $1,500, and we'll get it fixed, and you know, it could be between $5,000 and $6,000 is nuts. So he said, okay. So yesterday, my son and I went to Springfield, and we have a tow dolly. And the reason we have a tow dolly is it's one of those two-wheel trailers that you either back a car up on or you drive a car up on, and you strap it down, and then you can tow a vehicle, you know, to wherever you need it. So we have one of these because we need it because, you know, our vehicles break down because they're all rust-colored. Well, anyway, so we went to Springfield, and sure enough, our friend / instructor's car had a flat tire. And so I didn't have an air pump with me. Normally I have one in the toolbox of my truck, but I didn't because I had all other kinds of stuff in there. Didn't have room for it. And so there was a tow truck. And this guy stopped, and he was so kind, and he just took out his hose and filled up the tire with air. And he looked at me, and he said, and he saw that we were going to, while he was unloading his tow truck, he saw that we were loading the car onto our tow dolly. He came over and he said, so what do you do? I said, I'm a farmer. He said, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. Now, I don't get it. I mean, I had my, you know, T-shirt on and blue jeans, and, you know, they weren't pressed. They had, you know, the correct amount of oil stains on them, and I looked like, you know, I was a guy who just changed his oil, you know. But interesting, I guess I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but I thought it was kind of funny that you know, the guy asked me what I did, and I told him, you know, I'm a farmer. I mean, first thing I said, I'm a farmer, and he didn't believe me. But that's the whole story.
You know, I was thinking about what we was talking about last night, which is dealing, and I was boiling it down in my mind at 3:30 or so this morning. And we're dealing with, and Debra Brewster ahead of us was dealing with a lot of the same things that I was thinking about last night. But it's sort of like a philosophy of preparedness. And there's a story I'll tell you here. And I read this in a book years ago. There was a village. And in this village, there was an old man, actually, and he was known as a philosopher and a wise person, you know. And so this young man, he's getting ready, and he's thinking about getting married. And so he goes to this old man, and he says, "Sir, should I get married?" And the old man sat and thought for a while, and he said, "Absolutely, you should get married. If you marry a good wife, you will be happy all the days of your life. And if you marry poorly, you will become a philosopher." He was a philosopher, you know. So anyway, I just was saying, you know, I was thinking a lot about the philosophy of preparedness and why people don't do it or why people do it. and different things. And as I was listening to Debra and you talk last hour, I got to thinking to myself about Dane Wigington. Okay, here's a guy that is extremely competent, very smart, very motivated, okay, and now he is in a crisis. Imagine if every competent, prepared person that you know is in that same predicament. Because if this thing does come down all the way to the whole country, that's exactly the scenario you're going to be living with. And anyway, I just thought to myself, when we were saying that, you could put on one hand 1 or 2, 3 people at the most that would come to your farm, that would be welcome, that would show up with the right kind of stuff, the right kind of attitude, the right kind of motivation to do whatever it takes. 1 or 2 people, that would be, I think, almost generous.
Yeah, and as you say that, I was thinking about, some people who I would describe as if a person were having a barbecue in the backyard and there's, a couple cases of beer and, the guy that always fun to have around, just a great guy, a barrel of laughs, and you call him up and you say, you're having this little get together, and he goes, well, all right, I can come on over and I can help you drink your beer. if you need me to.
Yeah, right.
We don't need that. That's not what we're looking for.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking, too, one of the reasons I think people don't prepare, and we've covered parts of this, but I've been trying, I still do, as I think about this, and I'm like Debra, in a sense, it grieves me to see so many people that know enough to start doing something and they still don't do it. But I think people don't prepare because of 2 things: normalcy bias and fear. Normalcy bias is a huge pressure to conform to the rest of the lemmings that are around you, to conform to society as advertising has told you it should be. And I think people are basically lazy, and they're greedy, and they're selfish. And if you boil it down to where they're hungry, they're real hungry, you'll see that. You'll see that they're lazy, and they're greedy, and they're selfish. And you will be the recipient of whatever that looks like, or people will be. The people that have anything that has prepared will be the recipient of whatever that's going to look like from those that didn't prepare. What would you think about that?
Oh, I have to totally agree. And Joey in Michigan says something very similar. He sees people that just don't seem to understand, and yet they're the first to complain. They're the first to complain about how bad things have gotten their lot in life, but yet don't really seem to want to do anything about it. And one of the things I was thinking about this morning, I do some of my best, clearest thinking in the shower when the water is just going, shh, I have this white noise. And I was thinking about what is one of the common threads that runs through those of us who are preparedness-minded. And I was thinking about you and all of your accomplishments. You take 18 months and you get a lot done in 18 months. And then you look at Norm Shealy, who's going on 86 years old, who is nonstop go, go, go. He does seminars throughout the world. He's on the radio with us. He does a clinical practice. He's inventing. He's building new machines. And then Sonny Skidmore at KLID, one of our affiliates. She's 80, I think she's 89 years old. Goes to work every day. She runs the radio station, is on the air behind the microphone, goes out and sells advertising, drives her truck. I mean, the people who are preparedness-minded are go, 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 and aren't thinking about retirement, aren't thinking about going to Disney on vacation. They've got way more important things to do and way better uses for their money. And that's kind of a common thread that goes through all of us at USA Prepares. And it's not like we had a checklist and said, okay, you've got to meet these requirements in order to be part of us. It's just people who have the same thought processes seem to have gotten together over the years, and here we are. There was no advertisement saying, hey, y'all need to apply for this, USA Prepares radio slot, on the air. It's not like that. It just happened, and we all just think very similarly. Debra Brewster was talking about preparing and canning, and I got to tell you, if you think that canning is easy, and if you think in the short run you're going to save a lot of money, you're mistaken, right? Canning requires equipment. It requires a lot of time. And you look at that jar of spaghetti sauce for 99 cents or $1.29 in the store, and that's, you look at that and go, wow, that's cheap compared to all the work I have to put into getting a jar of spaghetti sauce prepared. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So it's not easy, but...
Go ahead. Well, as she was talking, my wife and I were kind of talking. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry. I thought I lost you there for a second. As Deborah was talking about the canning and how many jars she goes through and different things, I was asking my wife, I said, well, how many jars do you think we have down there, kind of in the cellar, And she says, right at 1,500. And so I got to thinking about that, and she was thinking out loud to me. She said, but if you just use 2 jars of green beans that you canned up every day, or if you got 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people here, and you use 2 cans of that, that's over 700 jars of just that a year. But just say you did
hold up. So, Kyle, I was thinking about, the 1950s and the 1960s, and during those years, for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, we'd go to grandmother's house, and the family would all get together, and we'd see them, and there would be these backyard picnics, barbecues, whatever you'd like to call it. And my parents would have dinner parties, and the neighbors would come over from, all over the neighborhood, and they'd have dinner together, and the adults would talk about what's happening, and there was the women's club, and there were the Kiwanis Club, and there were all kinds of these meeting-type events where you could, you'd see people and communicate, and I don't think we do that so much anymore. Is that the same in Montana?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we try to make connections through the United Way area, with the Neighbors in Need program. We try to support them guys, and because actually the head of that a lady made a comment one time, and I just sort of caught the edge of it. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking to another guy, and she said, now this is just last year, okay? She said, if it wasn't for the generosity of the churches in this valley, she said there would be people starving right now. That's how close a lot of this is, and people just don't know. And you don't see food lines because everybody stands in a normal line, and you've got an EBT card. And it looks like a debit card, or it looks like a credit card. And you just don't see food lines like you would back in the Depression. People don't have the connections anymore to be able to band together. And even too many patriot type guys and preparedness type people are thinking pretty much, them and their family, and that's what you're going to survive with. Deborah is right. I think she's correct. Having 5 hookups is just an amazing thought, but it's going to be tough to discern who's going to get to stay there, I'll throw a scenario out in your mind, people think about this. All right, so you're prepared, and you've got everything, but you had lights on last night, and nobody else did. Just say there was an EMP attack. You had lights on, and this young couple shows up, a man, a woman, and a little 2-year-old girl, and she's holding a baby, and they're starving. All right? So how calloused? What's going to be your response? How calloused is people going to be, you know? And it'll be different if it's at 6 months from now, as it would be, I mean, say it started today, as it would be in a month. Let's put 1 month down and they show up. That would your response. You probably still have plenty. You'll have lots. But what's going to happen after 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months? And you can see the end of what you made. And say you had a poor garden that year and it didn't produce as much as you thought it was going to produce. What are you going to do? You know, those kind of questions need to be crossed and thought about heavily and intently. Because these are moral questions that's going to be tough for people, especially if you can see the end of your food reserves.
I was greeting people at a reception line, if you will. They were lining up to register to vote at the Laclede Electric Cooperative meeting a couple years ago, and 2 years before that, I was on stage and I pulled a 5.56 cartridge, you know, AR-15 type cartridge out of my jacket pocket, my sport coat pocket. And I said on stage that, you know, one of these, I think I paid 20 cents for it. I think I said it that way. I think I paid 20 cents for this cartridge, and it's one of these aimed in the right place can take out a substation. 10,000 people can be without electricity. And then it would be, you know, think of what it would be like without electricity. And the next year, a gentleman approached me. He said, "Did you bring your bullet?" And I said, No, I didn't bring my cartridge." And he said, "That was idiotic. That was idiotic." And he was telling me that what I was saying was absolutely idiotic, and it made no sense, and it wasn't true. And I said, "Well, actually, it is true," and I verified it with the chief engineer at the electric cooperative. And so who is he? And he's the husband of one of the board of directors. So what I'm saying is we have people who have no clue as to what could happen, and they're in charge. Kyle Harris is with us in Montana. Kyle, how would you describe how difficult it is to get people to understand that actually they're in control of their lives and they can make it better? Are you successful in doing that? Because I am not. I'm a total failure, or almost a total failure, in terms of, you know, getting people in a meetup to, you know, Debra Brewster is great. I mean, she ran with the information and started implementing it, but she's the exception. There's so few and far between. I think maybe if 1% of the people who were at the meetup actually implemented the things that we talked about for their own betterment, that'd be a lot. Are you seeing the same kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you know what I've come to in the last hour there, where you were talking to Debra, and you said, you know, people need to be responsible for their own actions. You know, and I thought about responsible for their own actions and the consequences for them. You know, and I come also to the conclusion that if people aren't doing it already now, then they're not going to. The normalcy bias is incredible, and like I said before, fear it's fearful to look at all of this stuff that's coming in this, we're teetering on the edge of a financial collapse, and people don't even recognize it or even want to see it. But if that kind of fear motivates people to stick their head in the sand and love to like she was talking about, you know, they'll have a $300 cable bill or whatever, you know, for all their phones and all that kind of stuff, but they won't buy a hand pump for their well. Because if you buy a hand pump for a well, that means you're facing the reality that, oh no, the whole grid could go down. And if the whole grid goes down, that's just so overwhelming emotionally, right? So anyway, but I think fear and normalcy bias are two twin sisters, if you will, that cause a lot of struggle and a lot of conformity in society. We don't really want to see bad things, and we won't want to face up to the consequences of us not preparing. And or they look at preparedness as this huge, monumental project, like something you've done or I've done or Debra's done, huge, monumental project, and they see it all at once, and it's so overwhelming that they do nothing. And that's a fearful thing. It's a scary thing to look at all of it at once. But like you said, when I got to the place where I'm living now, I accomplished 90% of what I am still working on, of course, but I accomplished 90% of what's here now in the first 13 and a half months. So, and I'm still working on things. It's not like it's done by any stretch of the imagination. I'm starting to work on, putting shelves in rooms, building better shelves that's going to be eventually for my wife's dry goods room. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, we've got things in there, but I'm trying to make it more efficient all the time. How can I do anything? You think about the things that you could do. Like you were said, that can of spaghetti sauce for 98 cents. If you can get that and you get 25 or 30 of them and 25 or 30 bags of spaghetti, at least you've got to start. And it's a really small cost. You probably spend $35, $40 at the most for that. So I think, preparedness and people can move a little bit more towards something. Do something, though. Like Debra was saying, I totally agree with her. Do something, even if it's just a little bit at the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, I was trying to do some, as you were saying, I was doing a little bit of arithmetic. And so you were talking before about, yes, I agree with the spaghetti sauce scenario. And I was thinking about, okay, so let's say there are 3 people in your family. There's 3. And then you've got some outlaws, and there are 4 of them. So now and they show up, and they say, hey, we're here. And you go, great. So glad you're here. You brought everything you need, didn't you? And they go, well, actually, we're lucky we just got here. So, no, we don't have anything. And we have the clothes on our back. And by the way, we're hungry and thirsty and cold. And so now there's 3 of you, and then there's 4 of them. That's 7. So 7, if you have, let's say you just have a can of beans each for breakfast. That's 7 cans. And if you have a can of corn each for lunch, that's 7 more. That's 14. And if you have a can of baked beans for dinner, that is another 7. So that's 21 cans of food for the 7 people per day.
Yeah.
The numbers are staggering, absolutely staggering.
But you're
going
to be working. People are going to be working hard. That ain't going to be enough to feed anybody, especially young men. If they happen to show up, and they've got to work, they'll eat at least 1.5 times, what an older woman's going to eat. She'll eat less than a serving, normally speaking, they do. But the young guys they'll be producing and we're going to have to feed them. And, if you can up meat, people don't realize you're not going to eat like you have been eating because it's going to be like make a great big pot of stew that you're going to probably have for supper that night and breakfast the next morning, and it's going to have maybe a can of vegetables or 2 cans of vegetables in it and a can of meat, and it's going to be a 2 or 3 gallon stew that's going to be pretty watery. And if you're lucky and you have wheat and your wife makes up bread or something along those lines, you're going to fill up on bread or pasta or something else that's going to be, cheap and easy to feed a lot of people fast. It's just going to be a lot different, and people don't think about those kind of things. It's just the hardest thing to do, Vince. You're talking about trying to get people to think. The hardest thing to do is to try to put your mind in a place where it's never been. nor has it even ever conceived that there's the possibility of it ever happening. And you can't live in complete fear. Go ahead.
Yeah. So here are the numbers. So this is going to be staggering, class. So there's 3 of you, and then 4 of your outlaws show up, so it's 7. And then you're going to have just 1 can per person per meal. So we'll have 3 meals a day. So that's 21 cans a day times 7 days a week is 147 cans a week. And if you multiply that just times 4 weeks, that's 588 cans for a month. That's 49 cases of 12 cans in a case. 49 cases of canned food to get you through the first month.
Yeah. Wow.
It's staggering. So now when you talk about those 1,500 jars, most people probably said, wow, that's an enormous amount. And there's a lot of work that went into those 1,500 jars that you have canned. But that's at 588 cases a month. That's less than 3 months for the 7 people.
7. Yeah. But just like I said, there's no possible way that I'm going to allow people to eat that much. They're going to eat stews, and they're going to everybody's going to lose weight. I guarantee you that. Because there'll be enough if you don't plan for long term. So it's like that. You and I have talked before. You plan for the worst, and if it's a lot better, and it ends up everything, they get a power grid flying again in your area, and you've got all this stuff in 6 months. Fine, you've got some extra, and you were slightly hungry for 4 of the 6 months. Okay, but if you don't plan for being that, and say you could have went to a year if you had enough, and you're out in 6 months, and it doesn't come back on, then you're in the same boat as everybody else. And that's usually a really bad place to be.
Speaking of being in the same boat as everybody else, Kyle, in the 1950s here in Missouri, I wasn't here in the 1950s, but I've read and I've heard stories from those who were here. And there was a drought. And the drought was really, really serious. It was so serious that crops didn't grow. People were really hungry. So they went hunting. They killed just about every deer, rabbit, bird, snake, turtle. Everything you could think of was killed for food. And we almost drove to extinction wild animals here in Missouri. People can't believe that. They just can't believe. Could that really happen? Absolutely it could happen. And it did in the 1950s, right here where our farm is. Yes, it did happen. But people think that, and you extrapolate that scenario out to today, and you say, and you've heard hunters say, well, that's okay. I'm not worried. I got me a rifle and I'll go hunting. Well, look at the first day of hunting season. The first day is the most important because after the first day, there's not much left, right? Now imagine if that goes on for a couple days, or a couple weeks, or a couple months, or a couple years. That's what we're talking about. And Dane Wigington, class, that email that I got was heartbreaking. That he said that in order to protect his house, his property, he's got to do it alone. Where are all his friends? Where are all his friends? Maybe they're in the same boat. Or maybe they said, no, we're getting out of here, and we're not sticking around. It's too dangerous. It's got to be one, the other, or a combination of all the above. But it's really hard to get people to stick together. It really is. Even in the good times. We'll be right back. Kyle's with us. I was just typing, and I wanted to find out how much a wheel balancer is. I bought a John Bean brand wheel balancer for a few $100s, and the darn things used on eBay are $3,850. I couldn't believe it. But the reason I'm mentioning this is I can't find anybody to do work around here that is to my standards. including changing tires and balancing wheels. So I had to buy the equipment. I found it all used, and I bought a wheel balancer that is 3-phase, and that's a power that's available at, in larger areas. Well, we don't have 3-phase power here, so I was able to get this John Bean wheel balancer for about $400, but I have to convert 3-phase, single phase to 3-phase. So I bought a device to do that for $80. So the point is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. If you just start applying logic that has been given to you by God, your parents, and that you've picked up through your training. Back to the cans, that month worth of canned food, 588 cans, at 49 cents a can. If you go to Aldi, you can get cans at 49 cents. Baked beans, green beans, and corn. And how much is that? $288. $288. It may seem like a lot of money, but not if your life depends on it, right? That's plus tax. If your locality is as corrupt as ours and you have to pay tax on food, it's 588 cans at 49 cents a can is $288 plus tax. That could be a lifesaver. And yeah. But don't buy anything don't buy anything you don't want to eat. If you don't like corn, don't buy corn. And of course it's going to be mostly GMO, but I'm just using that as an example. Baked beans, a lot of protein in them, great way to go in an emergency. Okay? Really. Green beans, absolutely. You probably ought to have them anyway. So what we're saying is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. So forget that trip to Disney. Forget it. Because all you're going to have is memories. And you can't eat them. You can't eat memories. And forget the ball games. Because you can't eat them either. And what do you do if you go to a ball game? You talk about it on Monday. You go, wow, what a great game. Well, you see that, he was so great. Did you see that catch? That was unbelievable. What else are you going to do with the information that you learned at that ball game? That's it. Bragging rights. Don't do it.
Exactly. Vince, one of the things that I've thought about, and I've did with my boy, my youngest one in particular, is I told him, I said, you could learn to play basketball, but it ain't going to teach you nothing for real life. Or, I'll tell you what, we'll pay for jiu-jitsu lessons for you. And so we paid for jiu-jitsu lessons. He's not a great basketball player. I mean, he can play around and shoot a few hoops or something, but it ain't nothing compared to a lot of his friends. But I guarantee you in a fight, he would beat any of them, because he's really good. But but like you said, the one thing that's funny during the break, this last break, I was thinking the same thing you were saying. Folks, please, please, please set aside that coffee every day, $5, $6, $7 coffee with a tip, and buy some food when you get paid. Set aside $100. Every paycheck, every 2 weeks, set aside $100. That ain't a lot of money, and you can find a place. You're going to blow it at some point. You look at these different things that you can cut out of your life, and just believe me, one of these days, whether you use it, let's just hope and pray that it never happens, and those things never happen. Eventually, probably maybe not in your lifetime, but I guarantee you probably within your children's lifetime, they're going to face another depression that's going to make this last one look like a cakewalk. And they will have something. I tease my kids a lot. I said, if me and your mom aren't here, these canned goods and stuff like this, these are your inheritance. And just life,
I love it. And about the Starbucks type coffee, a guy came up to me at one of the meetups, and he walked up to me, handed me a cup of coffee, and it was from Starbucks. And he said, "Now you can't say you haven't had a Starbucks cup of coffee." I would never buy one, and frankly, it wasn't any better than anything that Mrs. Finelli would make. Kyle, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ben.